end up saying that the operation was successful, but the patient died. We don't want to die the patient. We don't want patient to die because we have experienced it in 1971. So we remain within the safe limits of political economy. Next. Now, national planning and economic coordination, and I want to walk you through the amendment so that you can see what are the implications for yourself. I will not have to say much. National planning and national economic coordination, this is the definition of the subject. It was there in the Constitution before the 18th Amendment, and it was in the Federal List Part 1, serial number 32. Now it is serial number 7, and the list has changed. It is now in Part 2, which has important implications. Next. Article 154.1 says the Council of Common Interest shall formulate, and these are important words, formulate and regulate policies in relation to matters in Part 2 of the Federal Legislative List, and shall exercise, and these are also important words, supervision and control over related institutions. This is not happening. Next. Article 156.2. Now, what are the institutions that the CCI should be regulating and controlling? Constitution mentions only one institution, one economic institution, which is National Economic Council. And National Economic Council, you can see, reviews the overall economic condition of the country and shall, for advising the federal government and provincial governments, formulate plans in respect of financial, commercial, social, and economic policies, and in formulating such plans, it shall, amongst other factors, ensure balanced development and regional equity, and shall also be guided by the principles of policy. Now, the only words that have changed here are the words underlined: balanced development and regional equity, which actually sums up the spirit of the 18th Amendment. That was the reason for the 18th Amendment, and that was also the platform of all the autonomy movements in the provinces. Next. Now, there is another word in the NEC mandate that it only advises. It used to advise the federal government and the provinces, and to make it functional, to achieve functionality, federal government had to act and the provincial governments had to act. But now, things have changed. Next. If planning is in Part 2, the National Economic Council is also under the supervision and control of the Council of Common Interest. It cannot perform its function unless it exercises supervision and control over related institutions, in this case, National Economic Council. So for transition from centralized planning to federalized planning, we have to do something here. Now, CCI is chaired by the Prime Minister with equal federal provincial representation. So majority rule prevails here, which is how it should be. Next. There are a few other things. Now, I've talked about balanced development and regional equity. After the 18th Amendment, provinces have full control over social sector, which is the main sector for planning. It also and has had full control of the production sectors of agriculture and industry, other than industry set up by federal government under some special laws. After the amendment and the 7th NFC, provinces have a larger public sector development program than the federal government. So their weight, their economic weight has also increased. They also have larger revenues to spend than the federal government. Therefore, that weight has to be reflected somewhere. Now, to make the process irreversible, the Constitution also says that a previous NFC cannot be revised. You cannot reverse it, as some people think it can be done. Under the Constitution, you cannot roll back the past NFCs. And there is an innovation here. Provinces can also contract domestic and external debt under the 18th Amendment. So the provinces today have a much larger economic personality than they used to have. Next. So where are we deviating from the Constitution? CCI is not involved in planning at all. It has nothing to do with planning process. This is a deviation from the Constitution. NEC has been reconstituted, but is functioning as before. And it is governed by the federal rules of business. NEC is just a committee of the federal cabinet. It has to be something related to CCI. And cabinet division, which again is ruled by the rules of business of the federal government and is under the control of the federal government, is the Secretariat of National Economic Council, which is a deviation from the Constitution. Next. Now, there are some non-constitutional bodies which are part of the planning process. They continue to function as if 18th Amendment never happened. There is an executive committee of the National Economic Council which keeps approving projects and programs as it used to. Again, it is a cabinet committee set up under the federal rules of business and is chaired by Federal Finance Minister. Planning Commission only provides technical input. Next. Now, before approaching ECNEC, there is a CDWP which used to be chaired by my friend sitting here. It has to clear all projects before they go to ECNEC. And it also approves projects up to probably a billion rupee or something. And the provincial projects above 10 billion, and if they involve foreign aid, have also to be cleared by this committee. Next. Now, there is also a concept clearance committee. Provinces, if they have to negotiate aid, or anyone, any ministry, they have to get the clearance of this committee. Now, this also violates Article 164, which allows provinces to negotiate with the donors. Next. Now, I said in the beginning that CCI has nothing to do with planning, but there is a hint that there is some recognition that CCI is the super body. There was a recent case regarding the permission to the provinces to allow tax. The article says that the provinces will do it subject to conditions specified by the National Economic Council. And how was this case dealt with next? Ministry of Finance prepared a summary that we should have some rules for provinces for contracting debt. Now this is important because for the integrity of monetary policy, which has to be for the country as a whole, there have to be some rules of the game here. The condition is perfectly fair. But see what happens. Ministry of Finance goes to CCI to get these conditions approved. But the CCI says, no, you go to the Council of Common Interest first, and then we will approve it, which is a recognition of the fact that CCI is the supra body. And CCI is the body not of federal government, not of provincial government, but of the federation. Next. So the decisions of NEC have to be approved by the Council of Common Interest. Now the same goes for economic coordination insofar as it affects the federation. Today there is an Economic Coordination Committee of the Cabinet, which like NEC and ECNET is a cabinet body ruled by federal rules of business. Now economic coordination business has also been placed in part 2 of the federal list. And as it is, coordination is fragmented. CCI has a role here too. Next. What should we do to reflect the spirit of the Constitution? Instead of rules of business of federal government, the rules of CCI should apply to NEC. Ethnic composition should correspond to the NEC composition, and it should be chaired by rotation. CDWP should be abolished because Nadimul Haq is no more there. Planning Commission is the institution related to the subject of planning and economic coordination, which is in part 2. It has to be under the supervision and control of the CCI through the NEC. Next. Now, to satisfy that, we have to make planning commission in place of cabinet division and inter-provincial coordination division, the think tank and the secretariat of the NEC as well as CCI. Because CCI also needs a lot of professional support. And I am not mentioning here the large number of regulatory bodies that also come under CCI, which also require a lot of professional work, and their planning commission can help. And planning commission's own composition should change, reducing the number of its members to 5, one each from the provinces and the federal government. Prime Minister chairs the NEC, CCI, and there is no need for him or her to chair the planning commission. The chairman should be appointed by the CCI to represent the federation and by rotation. Next. The federal government can keep using its planning and development division for its own projects, and maybe PIDE can be its think tank. Thank you. I didn't mention one thing. All this